In the know.
Good evening, everyone.
In the know.
Tony Reeves, fire. Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about. What does it mean? What will it bring? This is a reality we simply have to accept. Fire. Tony Reeves. Let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, let's get it rocking and rolling. As always, I am Tony Reeves, and thank you for visiting me again for another edition of In the Know. So I want to talk to you about the power of the Black church. Now, for those of you who are hearing this, some of you may be saying to yourself, oh God, I can next. Pause for a second. Before you decide to hit the next button, slow it up. Because I'm not coming from the religified standpoint of saying they got the best preachers and the best choirs and everything. I'm talking to you from a historical standpoint in terms of how the church was impactful in certain ways from my personal perspective and from my conversations. And let's start with the historical point from this. And I'm not going to go back to the beginning of time. I'm going to go back to my mom's time. My mom. Back when she was in college, we're talking the 60s, I asked her a very interesting question. I said, Mom, hey, did you participate in any of the civil rights movements? Now, my mom will tell you that she is a country girl who was shy and sheltered. She didn't really get involved with much, but she said she did participate in the march on Montgomery, one time. Of course, I had to laugh at her because I was like, so Mom, you got up, you were down for the people, you was riding, yeah. She turned to me and said, no, the guys who came to ask for our help were fine. And I was like, okay, yeah, well, it's nice to know college kids keep their priorities straight at all ages. So she said the one thing that really impressed them, besides she said the fact that they were clean cut and good looking and they had it all together, was they explained to her what needed to happen when she participated in the march. So she was like, okay, so what did they explain? She said, well, what they said was when they marched, they would have the men on the outsides of the march and the women would be on the insides. And then they explained to her what would happen when, not if, when the police came. She said she told me that invariably what was going to happen is that when you march, regardless of how peaceful, at some particular point, law enforcement or some crowds would try to break them up. And so what the plan was is that if it happened that way, what would happen is that the women would come into the middle of a circle that the men would make around the women. So the men would be on the periphery, on the outskirts, around the circle, and the women will be in the middle. And they told my mom, whatever happens, you do in that circle. So if you got to pee, you pee in that circle. If you got to crap, you got to crap in that circle. And then what they would do is, as a circle, they would move to the nearest Black church. And at this time, I'm assuming they knew where all the churches were along the routes. And so I asked Mom, I said, why was going to the Black church a necessary thing? She said, because back then, the Black churches knew that a lot of these people, the marchers and the protesters and so forth, needed a safe haven. So they would literally leave the doors unlocked. Now, it's amazing, yes, we know about stories of how some Black churches were firebombed and bombed during these time periods and so forth. But it was amazing to know that as long as you made it into the church, no one would bother you. It's kind of crazy when you stop and think about it. Violence all over the place, but once you get in the church, it's all good. So, kind of an interesting point. So, my mom, and I said, well, what happened? Everything I just said happened. We started to march. Here comes the guys on the horses and the bullhorns and everything like that, the crowds. They made a circle, and then they basically crept all the way to the church. I said, was the church unlocked? She said, yep, church was unlocked. They went inside, and I said, well, what happened when you got inside? Did they do anything? She said, no. Basically, they basically got inside the church, stayed there for the next 24 hours, slept there, and then the next day, got out. I said, well, what was happening on the outside? She said, nothing. Crowd dissipated. Police was gone. The march was scheduled for one day. They went inside. They stayed there. And then after they spent the night at the church, they left and went back. But the thing that blew my mind wasn't that she participated in the march. Wasn't the organization, even though that was profound too. It was the fact that the church, knowing what these young people or any of these people would be subjected to, created a safe space for them to go. And all I kept thinking was, for all of the different things, I can't speak to anybody else's religion. I can't speak to mosques, synagogues, other churches, whatever the case may be. But that really resonated with me, that the churches literally made it a safe space for them. But then if you are a student of history, especially during the civil rights movement, most of their meetings were in churches. So when they were organizing the bus boycotts, the sit-ins at the diners, the marches, voter registration drives, almost all of these happened at churches. And it's for people of color, black people, at the black church. And so when I thought about it, I remember somebody told me that people fail to understand that when we look back on history during this time period, that this was a violent, traumatic time for specific groups of people, especially black people, and especially in the South. So these churches had to be more than just places of worship. They had to be safe spaces for you to organize. They had to be safe spaces for you to have refuge. They had to be safe spaces in order for you to be nourished and developed and reared and protected in certain ways. And even though, being the kid that I am, born 1969, I did not have to experience that, I realized, looking back, that my church operated in the same manner in terms of providing a safe space for me to be revered, nourished, educated, protected, and, raised up accordingly. And it's funny because when you stop and I stop and I think about this as a whole, I didn't realize how powerful this was until one of my friends asked me about something about me in church when I was in college, about my activities back in high school. So when I was explaining to him all the things that I was doing outside of high school, he was like, "What were you doing?" One of the things I did is I started going down the list of all of the things that I was doing in church. He was just mind-boggled. I told him, well, I was the senior secretary for my Sunday school. I was also a junior superintendent for Sunday school. The idea was that at some particular point, depending on time, I would eventually become superintendent of Sunday school, even though I left to go to college before that happened. But this was in high school. I told him that I was a member of the usher board. So I was an usher. I worked the door. I also was a member of, it was what we called a Y member, which was a youth member. We also have life members, meaning they were part of the church for life. I was a member of that. I was in the youth choir. I was in the mass choir. I was in the men's choir. I was in all of these different activities within the church. Did not appreciate how these different activities and organizations helped me be reared in terms of organizational abilities. I got my leadership opportunities in the church. I participated in my first public speaking event at the church. And it's wild when I stop and think about all the different events and so forth. There was always an Easter program. They did the Easter egg hunt for kids at my church. I participated in Vacation Bible School. So as soon as the summer came, about a week out the year, I was there for Vacation Bible Study. We had Halloween in our church. Our church wasn't a big church. We're talking about a small church of maybe 100 people at any given point in time. They literally took our fellowship hall and created a haunted house. And they had stations outside of that. Really, the haunted house was basically a haunted room. It was a big, big room that they basically sent you in there, turn the lights off, and you heard all kind of noises. They would grab you from different angles, but it was awesome. They had us bobbing for apples. We did all these things in a safe space so that this way we could enjoy the Halloween festivity. Think about how crazy this is. A pagan holiday being celebrated in a church. Because guess what? As opposed to the children being out with their parents on the streets where they could possibly be harmed, they were in the safe space of a church. Christmas. Like clockwork, you knew it. There was going to be a Christmas program. It did not matter if you were a kid and you didn't want to do it. You were going to be in somebody's Christmas program. And that is what we were in as well. And then it took it even a step further in terms of work opportunities. I joked because I said somebody from my church got me my first job, but actually my first job was at the church. Meaning I actually, when I was in high school, they hired me to clean the bathrooms, take out the trash, and vacuum and everything like that. That was my first job at the church. And then all of the personal things that had an impact on me, meaning I had to laugh. I learned how to square dance at my church. We had one pastor, because when we have pastors that would rotate out, on a fairly frequent basis every couple of years. I remember we had one pastor whose wife was an aspiring beautician. She did my hair. I mean, I literally had a pastor's wife take care of my hair for me. I also got the opportunity to go on my very first, it was a formal date where one of my friends was going to a debutante ball. She needed an escort because she and her boyfriend had a breakup. And her father asked my mom would I do it. And of course, my mom said yes on my behalf, as if I had a choice. But it's amazing. So when looking at the totality of everything that I went through during my time for almost 15 years, because I got there when I was 3, between the age of 3 and the age of 18, and even a couple of years beyond, because I came back, whenever I come back home from college, I had to go to church. I realized that same nurturing, protective environment where the church served, especially the black church and my church, served more of a role than merely some place where you came there, gave your offering and tithes and went home. This was a crucial part of my overall development. So when you're looking at people and they're talking about church and so forth, ask them the question sometimes. How much is your church involved in shaping, guiding, and mentoring you in a positive way to be a productive citizen of society? Note as I'm saying this, not once did you hear me talk about politics, not once did you hear me say anything divisive. I am sharing with you how these entities fostered creating an environment that allowed me to be the best version of myself. And I can confidently say that I am so happy and I am so the better for it. All right, everyone. As always, thank you for tuning in to another edition of In the Know. You know you can find me on AnthonyReeves.com. And as always, I have to end with my favorite question of the day. Are you ready for the Anthony Reeves experience?